next up, we have an amazing panel of 4 peacebuilders who are going to come and talk about the work that peacebuilders do around the world. So Katie, Mike, Gulalai, if you want to come on up and find a seat. So we also have our, I will introduce them all properly, and we have our 4th panelist, should be online, Shiri. Do we have Shiri? Great.
Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm here.
Thank you so much. I know it's 7:45. I know many of you have traveled from around the country today, and tomorrow morning you're going to start lobbying on these issues. So I really appreciate one more hour of your time to just hear from peacebuilders about the work of peacebuilding. So I'm going to briefly introduce our speakers before we kind of go into the questions. On our far left in fantastic pink, although I guess it's reading red Mercy Corps colors on Zoom. Katie Crosby is Mercy Corps' Senior Director for Policy and Advocacy. She has over a decade of experience in policy development, budget expertise, and legislative affairs. Prior to Mercy Corps, Katie was a senior professional staff member at the House Foreign Affairs Committee. She also served at USAID and the Government Accountability Office, so she has a view from all 3 perspectives on this work. And she holds a BA in Political Science from Wheaton College and a Master's in International Public Policy from Johns Hopkins School of International Service. Thanks so much for being with us tonight, Katie. Mike Jobbins leads Global Affairs and Partnerships at Search for Common Ground. He joined in 2008 and has designed, developed, and managed conflict resolution, violence prevention, and peacebuilding programs around the world. He was senior program manager for the Africa region and worked on designing and developing programs in 22 countries during his leadership of that team. Before returning to DC, he also worked in the DRC and Burundi's regional office. So he has a wide variety of experience across the African continent. He has a master's from Georgetown and a BA from Harvard. And then Shiri Ourian has been the executive director of the American Friends of the Parent Circle since 2013. Previously, she was a senior consultant at Ben Orr Consulting, where she provided strategic communication and resource development consulting for progressive nonprofit organizations in Israel and the West Bank. She has a BA from Vassar and a master's in public health from Hebrew University. Lastly, we have Gulalai Ismail is the co-founder and chairperson of Aware Girls, a young woman-led organization working towards gender equality and peace in Pakistan. She has advocated at the UN for peace and security resolutions, set up women's support networks across Pakistan and Afghanistan to counter violent extremism among young people and bridge women peace activists. She's also the recipient of multiple international awards, a few of which include the Humanist of the Year Award, Commonwealth Youth Award, Chirac Prize for Conflict Prevention. She's also been named among the 30 under 30 youth leaders from the National Endowment for Democracy. So we have a fantastic breadth of knowledge. I'm going to start off with a few questions, and then we'll have some time for questions from the audience at the end as well. So to just sort of dig into this, this audience has heard 6 ways to Sunday, that they are asking for $60 million for Complex Crises Fund, $25 million for reconciliation programs, and $6 million for atrocities prevention. But I'm wondering, Mike and Katie, your organizations receive support from these accounts. And I'm wondering if you can share a story of the work funded by these programs and anyone that particularly inspires you or was notably effective. And we'll start with Katie.
Great. Thanks. Thanks so much for having me here, and it's great to see you all. In terms of the work that Mercy Corps has done with the support of the accounts that have been described, there's one in particular that stands out. I will say that we've had funding from each of those accounts, as well as in combination with others, and I think that that's definitely a theme where our peace building work is always really in conjunction with our other approaches to poverty reduction, to improving social cohesion, to reducing food insecurity, and others as a multi-mandate organization. And so, for example, in Uganda, we have the ECOSIL program, which started in 2017 with Reconciliation Fund money, and then has actually been continued with the use of CCF, Complex Crises Fund money. And so this was a program that really looked at the layering of multiple compounding issues in the community. Poor governance, limited natural resources, collective trauma with a history of intercommunal violence and ongoing social tensions. And this was all then further compounded by climate change and the increasing demand for resources, particularly around livestock. And so criminality really started to spike in the community, whether it's cattle rustling, gender-based violence. We were seeing kind of spikes across the spectrum. And so we took an integrated approach to tackle this issue in several different ways using the funds. And that was to first empower women's leaders and council of elders to help develop and empower and support community-led engagement and community buy-in, providing mental health support given the trauma that had occurred and had continued to really permeate the community. And so acknowledging that that was part and parcel of not just a health response, but a peace building response, a community response in order to have sustained change. And then finally, increase community collaboration around water and land projects in terms of ensuring equitable sharing of resources, communal governance around those resources in order to ensure that, again, this was leading into a sustainable pathway for the communities that we were looking to come alongside and engage. And we have seen, I don't want to say incredible success just because I don't want to oversell it, because this is kind of boring away at hardwood work. But it is visible, and we believe that it is sustainable. And so those are the two of the things that we really look for in our efforts and want to highlight. I think in this way also it has helped us build out the value and demonstrate the importance of conflict sensitivity in other programming. We have other non-CCF funded activities also in the region, primarily focused around food security. And our experience with CCF and Rec Fund programming has really demonstrated that integrating that in across our programming really brings out a host of benefits, and is something that we want to make sure that, especially as a development and humanitarian organization, that we are not looking at these things in isolation, but looking at the whole self of the individual and the community in looking forward. And that has been picked up on by Catholic Relief Services, who is also working in the area, as well as an ongoing collaboration with them, as well as USAID, in helping identify those lessons and make sure that they don't just stay within this community or even within, the musty tomes in Mercy Corps' monitoring and evaluation framework. So that's something that maybe can kick things off as an example of where Rec Fund and CCF can really make an impact on the ground.
Thank you. Mike?
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Ursula. Thanks, Katie. And it's great to be with everyone and for you to end a busy day and get ready for a busy tomorrow here with us. This is just a huge pleasure. It's a huge honor to be here with you all, not only for myself, but on behalf of all my colleagues in Afghanistan, in Sudan, in Burma, in Israel, in Palestine, in Yemen, in Congo. The work that you all do and that you're about to do tomorrow is something that enables lives to be transformed around the world. I'm someone who has the privilege of getting to work with all of those colleagues, and I get the steady streams of emails and you get to hear from day in, day out. But I want you guys to know that what you're doing is making an awful lot of good happen in the world. Ursula, you asked me to give an example, and there's a lot I can give, but maybe the one that sticks out most for me, I led our team in Cote d'Ivoire during the war there about 10 years ago, a little bit more than 10 years ago. Cote d'Ivoire, for those of you who don't know, is a country a little bit smaller than Texas. It's where about 2/5 of the world's chocolate comes from. It's probably its biggest claim to fame on American grocery stores and so forth. And it was a place that had experienced a stalemate, a political stalemate between North and South for many, many years. And my Ivorian colleagues, Muslim, Christian, different ethnic groups, different regions, looked at the situation and said, if the war was going to come back, if the stalemate was going to be broken in violence, these are 8 towns, these are 8 cities where we would see serious risks of massacres. That's what they saw. That's what they were talking to their colleagues. So we went to the Reconciliation Fund. Neil Levine actually was up on the screen earlier, ran it at the time, and they gave us some funds to support people in these 8 towns. But the funds weren't enough. The Reconciliation Fund was too small at that time. So my colleagues, we drew up a list, ranked them. We worked on it. We could stretch the money to 6 out of the 8 towns that we thought had a high risk of massacres. We worked with the local government. We worked with the prefects there, which is something akin to like a mayor, the local government officials. We started bringing women together, young men together, people who we thought might be on the front line of conflict, people who are divided from each other based on religion, based on history, based on who was a migrant, who was a native born as they sort of saw it. Training people in mediation, training them in how to negotiate, how to de-escalate situations. We produced a radio show about a taxi driver that picked up people from different backgrounds, and while they sat in the back of his motorcycle taxi, he talked about what was going on in from different perspectives, and old men, young women, Christians, Muslims, and so forth. And we did that really intensively, and the Reconciliation Fund enabled us to do that. The war did come. The stalemate was broken. And we were able to reach 6 towns. The 7th was a place called Duekwe. It was number 7 on our list. That was a place, unfortunately, where nearly 1,000 people were massacred in a horrible situation. I was out there in the IDP camps a few days after the massacre. People dying of cholera, absolutely impossible, situation. And then went up the road to the last town where we had worked in Danane, and the mayor of that town said, if you guys hadn't been here working with me, working with our people before that, everything that happened down the road would have happened in my town too. And if you guys had been down there, that what happened there never would have happened. And the horrible thing was, of course, we knew that. We knew that before. We had, it was number 7 on the list. And I think my Ivorian colleagues, the civil society groups, I think we take a lot of courage that, we did the best we can do. But when we engage with groups like this, and when we look at how, USAID, how the Reconciliation Fund, how the Complex Crisis Fund can serve the people of the world, can serve the American people, it's a great opportunity to help them, people in Cote d'Ivoire and in Afghanistan, whatever, help the best they can do, be a little bit closer to what's needed, and to be a little bit closer to building the kind of world that they deserve to live in, that they aspire to live in, and that makes all of us the better for it. Thanks.
Thank you. And I think that ties us nicely into our next 2 speakers, Shiri and Gulalai, who are going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like on the ground. So to start with Shiri, I know the Parent Circle has been supported by USAID, particularly the reconciliation programs. And I'm just wondering if you can start by telling us a bit about the work that the Parent Circle does and what impact you've seen from its work.
Sure. First, thank you so much for having me here today with you all. It's a great pleasure. Also, thank you so much for the work that you have done and are about to do tomorrow. We are very grateful. The reconciliation funds from USAID has supported important projects for the Parent Circle. The Parent Circle Families Forum is a joint Palestinian-Israeli organization. All of our members, we have more than 700 members. All of them have lost a loved one to the conflict, and all of them have chosen a path of peace rather than revenge. They use their stories, they share their stories with the general Israeli and Palestinian public and the international public to inspire people to believe that there is another way, that violence is not the only answer. Sadly, since October 7th, we have many more newly bereaved families, many of whom will join the Parent Circle in our mission, and many who are still reeling from the terrible tragedies of October 7th. And I just want to take a moment to recognize all the lives that have been lost since October 7th, both Israelis and Palestinians. Up until October 7th, we were running a program called the Parallel Narrative Experience. That project had been a project that was funded by USAID for nearly 10 years through several rounds of proposals. The premise of our work is based on the power of narratives. How do people who have paid the highest price to the conflict, if they can choose peace, then anyone should be able to? And how do we use narratives, both personal narratives, historical narratives, national narratives, to create deeper understanding, deeper empathy, greater humanization of the other side. So an Israeli and a Palestinian understand 1948 very different. For one, it is the Independence Day, and for the other, it is the catastrophe day, the Nakba. Same with 1967. So how do we hold both of those narratives? And we see today what's happening in Israel-Palestine, that the ability to hold multiple narratives and have them not be mutually exclusive is even more important. We have been doing this work on the ground in this narrative project, and we have nearly 2,000 alumni from the project, people who have completed the several-month-long workshop and are part of a strong alumni community. That community right now is struggling. There is not a lot of legitimacy for any sort of dissent, and either in Palestine or in Israel. That being said, they're still all very connected. We saw great results from all of our projects with USAID. We saw deeper levels of knowledge of the other side. There's a complete cutoff, right? Intentionally, Israelis and Palestinians are cut off from each other so that they cannot see each other as human beings, so that it is easier to inflict violence on somebody, or at least be supportive of violence against somebody who you do not know as a human being. So this narrative project was an opportunity from people from opposite sides of an ongoing conflict to meet each other as human beings and get to know each other. Sadly, in 2019, I believe, the funds, USAID funds, were ended under the Trump administration, and we were not able to complete our round of funding. Now that funding is under a different name. It's called MEPA, the Middle East Partnership for Peace Act, and we finally just now have been awarded a new grant under that round of funding.
Thank you, and thank you for all your work in such a difficult context and at such a difficult time. I'm glad to hear there are so many alumni who are still in connection and in network. And to the question that was asked in the audience earlier, what could we do with a little bit more funding? I want to turn to our colleague Gulalai Gulalai did not receive a grand grant from USAID to start her program, to start her organization. It started with a couple of sisters that wanted to see some change. So I just wanted to turn it to Gulalai. Can you tell us what inspired you to found Aware Girls? What was the work it does? And are there any highlights you'd like to share with us? Any great stories?
Yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, my work
Sorry.
started.
Can you pull your mic down a little bit?
Yeah.
There you
So thank you so much. I'm honored to be here today. My work on peace building and gender equality started back in 2002 when I was at school, a teenager, and I thought going to school is tiring. But right at that time, when school homework used to look like burden, one of my cousin, who was just a few years elder than me, she was taken out of school, and she was married off to a man who was almost twice her age. She wanted to become a pilot. She has dreams about her life. That was kind of like the moment in my life when I realized that the culture around me, which was very patriarchal, I was growing up in a rural, conservative area of Pakistan known as Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, the area that became hit of terrorism after post 9/11. It became a target of terrorism. So growing up in that area, that was kind of the time when me and my sister, we didn't want the same thing happen to us. We wanted to stop it. We were young. No one was hearing us. No one thought our ideas are important. And we wanted to do something to stop it happening in our community. So we set up an organization, Aware Girls. It was like me and my sister. And we decided that it will be a platform for young women and girls where we will raise awareness among them about their rights. And we will give them leadership skills, strengthen their leadership skills so that they can act as agents of change and equality in their communities. We gave the organization name Aware Girls because at that time we thought that women are not standing up and bringing a revolution against patriarchy because they're not aware of their rights. Of course, we were young, so we were like, we will give awareness to girls. But of course, during the more we worked with young women, the more we worked at policy level and in the communities, we learned that it is not an issue of lack of awareness among young women. It's more of a system of inequality that is perpetuated by the culture, by the religion, by the society. There's like a whole system that makes sure that gender inequality perpetuates. So that was how we started as a group of young women in 2002. Few years down the block, in 2009, a military operation was started by Pakistan in one of the districts near my hometown in Sawat. The military operation was started against Taliban, and within a matter of days, 2 million people, most of whom were women, were displaced from Sawat. Many of those women came to my hometown, to like Peshawar, to Sawabi, where I was growing up, where I grew, and to other parts. So when all these women came, and we were running this young women-led organization, so we decided that we will do research with these women to find out that what are the impacts on the mental health or social life of women who are facing conflict. And while we were doing the research, we found out that how the conflict has traumatized women and children. So we started a trauma healing program with women and children. And during that program, we learned that we, alone, by working on trauma healing with women who are the victims or survivors of the conflict, we cannot solve the problem if we do not heal the communities from conflict. So the conflict, the trauma that the women were facing, or children, was a symptom, but the root cause was that the community is facing trauma. So the social fabric of the community has been destroyed by the conflict. And if we want our communities to heal, then we have to have a sustainable peace building program that will make sure that the root causes of conflict are addressed. So we started a program in 2009 with the name of Youth Peace Network. And the purpose purpose of the program was to reach out to young people who are vulnerable to the recruitment of militant organizations, who are vulnerable to the narrative of the militant organizations. And we decided to work with them so that we can prevent them from recruitment. And the reason that we decided that we need to work with young people, because as a young person growing up in that region, I grew up with slogans of militant organizations on the wall, in the wall chalking on the walls, and they openly recruiting militant organizations or militants openly spreading their extremist narratives through schools, through television, through radio, through every platform available, even through education. The state is even complicit, as you already spoke today about how different actors have priorities and what is profitable for them. So even our education system was promoting and is promoting hatred and intolerance. So growing up, I had seen that. I had been a victim of that. And I thought that I can use my own experiences. We can use our own aware girls can use their experiences on how to reach out to young people and prevent them and give them an alternative perspective towards people who are different from them. So with the Youth Peace Network, what we would do that we would select young peace activists from our communities. We would train them in peace building programs, and then these young people would work directly with other young people in the communities using peer-to-peer education approach, interfaith dialogue, peace education programs would be used by these young people. We have in the past years, since 2009, we have trained more than 1,500 young people in Pakistan and in Afghanistan, and these 1,500 trained peace activists who work as seeds of peace, they have reached out to more than 20,000 young people in Pakistan and Afghanistan to preventing them from joining militant organizations in these countries. So this is the kind of work that we have been doing.
Thank you. I think one thing that's really wonderful to hear through all of these stories is, one, how peacebuilders look at those who are marginalized, that peacebuilders look at networks and at communities, and how can we create ripple effects for peace, whether that is looking at those who have suffered from the violence, those who face trauma, looking at young women, looking at the Council of Elders and women leaders, as Mercy Corps was discussing earlier, or community leaders, as in Côte d'Ivoire. And it's not just about connecting with one person. It's about connecting with one person who connects with two more, who connects with two more, who can spread those messages and carry that work forward. And I think that's part of why peace building is so cost effective, is it's about that power mapping and understanding how can we engage the right people and how can they carry that message forward. So just a couple more questions before we jump into the audience. So just back to Gulalai, I know your family and you have faced many threats because of your work as a peace builder. And Shiri, I know the ongoing violence in Israel and Gaza must make the work of Parent Circle very difficult, especially with the alumni. But I want to ask you both, what inspires you to keep working toward peace in the face of these challenges? What makes you want to get up in the morning and keep working on this when there's so many challenges ahead and so much pain?
Number one, peace building is a commitment, and it's a long-term commitment, and it starts before the threats and the persecution starts. The repressive governments, dictatorial states, governments, they believe that by oppressing or by threatening, by persecution, they can silence peace builders. But I think that peace builders around the world have shown that we will not be silenced by any kind of persecution. So even when in 2019 I was placed on a kill list, and even when my parents for 4 years were were booked in sedition and treason cases and terrorism cases, and they had to face the court for 4 years. That could not stop us from our peace-building work, because the impact of the peace-building work that we had been seeing was far greater. For example, when we, as I stated, that in our work, gender equality and peace-building work has been so, we believe that they're linked together. They cannot be separated from each other. And what we had seen as a result of our work, when in the woman that we had been training under one of the programs that is called a civic participation program, in that program, it just from after two trainings, in 2015, when local elections were happening, 6 women who had never taken part in any political processes before our training, they took part in local elections and they won those local elections. 4 of them were direct beneficiaries, 2 of them were indirect beneficiaries. So that was the impact of the program, that it is developing women leadership at grassroots. And these women who are going and sitting in these local councils, they are raising women's issues, they are raising peace issues, they are raising development issues. So by bringing more politically aware women to the local councils, we are making those local councils more representative of the needs of the community, number one. And number two, when we started the community from where I come from, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, when it comes to statistics, it has the lowest female literacy rate in Pakistan. It has the lowest female employment rate in Pakistan. It's patriarchy is quite stronger. Tribal norms are very strong over there. But when the women with whom we have engaged, in these programs, like in 2018, in 2013, when general elections were happening, we decided that we want to monitor the elections, because though they were the first peaceful transition from one government to another in Pakistan. Usually the history of democracy in Pakistan, if you are aware, is sketchy. So that were the first, it was like the first peaceful transition from one government to another. And we wanted to see how women's electoral rights are protected, or if they're able to practice it. And we wanted young women to do the election monitoring. And in that area, it seemed impossible. Our goal, like we wanted, was very high, and by high we were like, we will recruit 60 young women and they will go to the polling stations, they will monitor the elections. We thought we will not be able to recruit, but the women with whom we have worked, when we sent out a call for applications, we received more than 100 applications. We were able to make a team of 100 young women who in the rural areas of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province went on the day of election, monitored the elections on election day. And what was funny, we were so scared. We were like, these women, the families will not allow them to go to the polling stations, because these polling stations are often far away. Election monitoring is a very tedious work. You need to sit until late night until all of the counting is completed. In the morning, at 6 a.m., we were giving wake-up calls because we were so scared that women will not turn out. So at 6 a.m., we were like giving wake-up calls, and when the woman would pick, they were like, we're already on our way to the polling stations. What are you talking about? That was the first ever election monitoring done by young women in Pakistan, and it has set a precedent now in Pakistan. Now many civil society are doing like women inclusive election monitoring. These women with whom we work, they have established citizens committees, and these citizens committees are acting as a bridge between communities and the policymakers, and these women are making sure that the concerns of the communities are reached to the policymakers. So there is so much amazing things that the impact of the work is so much far greater, and that is why I choose to. It is a choice. I choose to continue as a peace builder. However, from my experience, what I have learned when I was though my persecution has long started before 2019, but 2019 was. In 2019, the persecution reached to a point where it became a matter of life and death. I was placed on a state kill list. The Taliban, one of the ex-spokesperson of Taliban was given the responsibility to assassinate me. And I got to know this from United Nations letter sent out to Pakistan that I'm on a kill list. And just a few days before that letter, just on the basis of 1.5 minute speech, 3 cases of sedition, treason, sedition and terrorism and whatnot, they were made against me, like defamation. Many cases were made against me, like anything they could find in the laws of Pakistan. And for 4 months, I had to stay in hiding. And even after 4 months, when I managed to leave Pakistan, and I was able to leave Pakistan because by then I was already a very well-known human rights defender. New York Times was publishing articles about me. So the world knew about me, and my case couldn't be like, it was not it was kind of like a high-profile case. But even then, what we learned was that there is no mechanism for the protection of local peace builders. We choose to do this work, but this work at times can become risk, and the threats are not empty threats. Some of the governments actualize these threats, and when the threats are actualized, there is no support mechanisms for local peace builders. So what I advocate for is when we ask for funding for local peace builders, we are not just asking for funding for local peace building, but also protection mechanisms so that people like me, they can live and they can choose to work on peace building in their communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Shiri, I don't know if you can share a little bit about what inspires you and what inspires the founders and the staff of Parents Circle Families Forum, especially in these days since October 7th?
Yeah, I think for many people, it's a question of what's my other choice, right? Like, violence does not work. We see that. Violence is not the option. The only option is peace. And I get my inspiration from all of the bereaved members. So from Robbie Damlin, who is a bereaved Israeli mother, whose son was killed by a Palestinian sniper at a checkpoint. He was in the reserve. He was a man of peace, and he struggled about serving in the occupied territories. He went because he thought he could be an example to he was the commanding officer. And when the army came to tell her that her son had been killed, apparently one of the first things she said was, "You may not kill anyone in the name of my son." And Robbie Damlin has been speaking around the world every day since then, sharing the story about David and her story about her choice to walk a path of peace. I'm inspired by Bassam Aramin, who is a Palestinian father, the protagonist of the novel A Paragon. Bassam was a Palestinian freedom fighter. He was caught attempting to throw a grenade. No one was injured. He did not know how to use it, but he spent 7 years in Israeli prison. In his time in prison, he had a transformation. They showed him a movie about the Holocaust, and he had been somewhat excited to go see a movie about his enemies suffering and being killed. And instead he found himself in tears watching the women and children suffer. And he also befriended his Israeli jailer and learned that, if you want to conquer your enemy, you must know your enemy. And he learned Hebrew. He came out of jail. He started an organization of ex-combatants and ex-soldiers for peace. And a few years later, his 10-year-old daughter, Abir, was shot and killed by an IDF border patrolman right outside of her school with a rubber bullet to the back of her head. He joined the Parent Circle immediately. The Parent Circle is one of the only organizations that does not want any new members. Sadly, there are many new members now. I'm inspired by Maoz Inon, who lived in the Gaza envelope. His parents lived in the Gaza envelope, and they were burned alive on October 7th. And it's been only 5 or 6 weeks since then, and Maoz is already speaking out about the importance of peace and the importance of a Palestinian state, and about treating people with dignity and separating Palestinian civilians from Hamas. It's people like that I don't want to even imagine having to live through such an atrocity. And it's people like that who can walk this extraordinary path that inspire me and help me go on.
Thank you. And I think one thing that continues to inspire me is hearing how we can do our small part to stand in solidarity with peacebuilders like Gulalai, with the Parent Circle, and it's tragically too many members. This year on our advocacy team national calls, we were joined by a peace builder with Search for Common Ground, Hervé Mbari, who is based in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And we were joined by Tariq, who works with Invisible Children, based in the Darfur region of Sudan. And as Representative Jacobs referenced, the Darfur region is facing intense violence at the moment. And we heard from his colleagues this week that Tariq is not only safe, him and his whole team are continuing to work. That in the face of civil war, in the face of mass violence, in the face of memories of genocide, they're continuing to work. And so I am very inspired to continue to work ourselves and continue to try and support them from here. And so to not so subtly pivot the panel, I'm going to close with Katie and Mike. Katie, I know you spent a long time working on the Hill. You have been on the receiving end of lobby visits from the likes of FCNL and others. What about constituent advocacy makes an impact on issues like this?
Well, I mean, the first thing I would say is, as a former Hill staffer, it matters. And it does have an impact. So I know that it can feel daunting at times, or that you're just kind of trotting the halls over and over again, trying to buttonhole a 24-year-old staffer who may not be the most informed or the most sensitive or the most bought into your issues. But that's what makes it so important. Because if you don't do it, who will? And so I do really want to affirm that and to really thank you in advance for the work that you'll be doing. I think a couple of things, at least from my experience, tend to stand out or tend to make a difference. And I'm sure that Ursula and others at FCNL have worked to equip you and to support you in your messaging, which is fantastic. So, being prepared is great, but I think specific stories and specific examples and related to that, why you are doing this. It doesn't have to be, seeing the light, complete transformation in, your own personal story, but there's a reason that you're here. And there's a reason that you cared enough to show up. And so I think being able to demonstrate that and bring that into how does that translate? How does that relate to what you are advocating on? On the flip side, being able to, even the benefit of a quick Google search, of knowing who you are going in to talk to, who your representatives are, who your senators are, what they care about, what they're interested in, what motivates them, what got them into Congress. And I mean, you heard Rep. Jacobs even just now talking about how, so much of her worldview, both as a person and as a member of Congress, is informed by the fact that, San Diego is a military town, and that has an impact, and that is the lens through which she views things, and the ways in which, she is most likely to be motivated in engaging, in listening, and hopefully acting. So, and I think the last thing that I would say is, I think, especially in this environment where, everybody is sick of unprecedented times, everybody is, tired of a lot of needs around the world, which is horrible, but is just the way things are at the moment. You're looking at a lot of difficulties around budgets, around supplemental funding. And so I do think, going back to what Ursula touched on earlier, is being able to point to the multiplier effect of peace building. And sometimes, it can be tough to prove a negative. Very rarely do you have a story as compelling and as stark as Mike talked about in terms of that seventh town. As terrible as I hope we have fewer of those. But it does mean that it can, especially in the peace building space, can be tough to kind of prove the negative or what didn't happen. But I think to the extent that you can look to that and can encourage looking upstream before things get worse, is increasingly appealing because it has the added benefit of being a heck of a lot cheaper than responding to an even worse crisis.
Thank you. And to close us out, so please get your thinking hats on. We have a few minutes for a couple questions from the audience. But just to close us out, Mike, you went from working around the world, working across Africa in communities on peace building, to being the head of global partnerships and something.
Yeah, I forget it too.
Head of advocacy at Search for Common Ground. What do we've been on many lobby visits together over the last decade. For a while, we had a really good kind of pitter patter going. But what kind of inspires you in your advocacy here in DC, and how do you translate sort of your work as a peace builder into your work as an advocate?
Yeah, thanks. I think, it goes hand in hand. I mean, I started talking about some of the luxury, but, I think a lot of people, all of us and every Hill staffer you're going to meet tomorrow, opens up Twitter or reads the newspaper, and the world seems awfully bad in a lot of ways. And when you're looking and reading news, you're talking about Sudan or Afghanistan or Israel, Palestine or Pakistan. It's really easy from the news to imagine the entire place as being like the Thunderdome. Nothing can be done. It's all war. It's all bombs. It's all whatever. And the only thing to do is more guns, more bombs, more safety through everything that can and can't buy. But the reality is that it's not that's part of the story. But the other part of the story is the women waking up every day in Sudan, brokering local ceasefires to keep the markets open. It's the parents that Shiri was talking about, choosing a different way to not only for their lives, but for their societies. And every single day, there are people who are making a change. And at the end of the day, this field is called peace building. It's about build, and you can't build what you don't have. And the fact is that an awful lot of stuff that we have, that people have around the world, fighting for something better, and that the U.S. can invest in. I saw somebody when I was sort of grabbing a glass of water, someone around here with a shirt that said the cost of war is too much, or something like that. And it's certainly true in human terms. It's true in financial terms too. Every year the humanitarian appeals go up, and depending on how fiscally minded your interlocutors are, I like to remind every year the humanitarian appeals go up, and that's not because there are more disasters and floods, although there are. It's because of the wars. It's because of the problems that people in this town haven't figured out how to solve. And part of the way to do that is to invest in the people who are solving them, whether it's the women in Sudan, whether it's Pakistan, elsewhere. And so I try to make that point that in a lot of ways, what we're talking about here is the stitch in time that saves nine on the financial side. If you can create an environment in Congo where refugees can return home, that's healthy, safe, that's a better and more dignified life for them. It's also less UNHCR bills. There's less UNHCR refugee camp bills that sooner or later wind up at the feet of the international community. If you can help bring a peace to Sudan, there's less peacekeeping bills that show up. And so depending on who I'm talking to, I try to remind people that not only is peace the right thing to do, it's the rational thing to do, and above all, it's ultimately doable. And the biggest burden isn't going to be borne by Americans. The biggest burden is borne by Ivorians, Sudanese, Afghans, Israelis, Palestinians. They're the ones making the biggest investment. But America's investment can help make the rest of that possible.
Thank you. It's a great line. I'm going to steal it. All right. Do we have mic runners? Yes, Sophia and Carla. And Sophia and Carla are two of our fantastic program assistants working on climate change and nuclear nonproliferation.
Woo!
Speaking of young peace builders, they're out here. All right, in the far right, over here, we got one over here in the suspenders. And then Sophia, we'll go here next. And if you could just say your name and where you're from.
Earl Smith, Barnesville, Ohio yearly meeting. I'm concerned, I haven't heard anything in the last month how the Friends schools in Ramallah have been affected.
Thank you. I don't know if this panel can answer that, but we can answer that. We are in touch, so thank you. And right here, this.
Hi, my name is Ariana Perez. I'm from Dallas, Texas. And I would just like your opinion regarding, especially as peace builders, regarding occupied Palestine right now, and our messaging that we will be trying to get out. I think we've been trying to call for a ceasefire for the longest now. We've been protesting, we've been marching in the streets. Obviously, we all aim for peace and we strive for, peaceful resolutions. But the fact is, we've been advocating, and nobody is. It's clear that the U.S. is not willing to go for a ceasefire. So, should we change our messaging more towards ending occupation or apartheid? I think that will ultimately lead to a ceasefire and more peaceful resolutions. So, do you think the messaging should be changed?
Thank you. And we had one other question in this corner. The woman, I believe. Sorry, I don't have great eyesight.
Just a quick comment. You had words of wisdom from, Proverbs, stitch in time saves nine. And another one that strikes me that fits this situation that a lot of the senators and reps will understand right away is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yeah. Thank you. And
Rachel McNair from Kansas City, Missouri.
thank you. I love the Midwest representation here this evening. And I cannot see it from where I'm sitting, but do we have a question online? I don't know if, all right. No, thank you, Alicia. Okay, so we will get you an answer on the Ramallah Friends School. My colleague Hassan is in contact with them, so we can find that out. But I know we'll start with Katie, and then I'll let Shiri speak to it as well. Katie, I know Mercy Corps as what the term of art, a multi-mandate organization, which means you work in many different areas, including humanitarian assistance, peace building, development. What are you guys seeing in this situation, and can you tell us a little bit about your guys' advocacy at the moment?
Sure. And yeah, apologies for slipping into the jargon there for a moment. I couldn't help myself with the multi-mandate comment. But what it does mean, as Ursula mentioned, is that we do have humanitarian as well as development and peace building activities in both the West Bank and in Gaza. We have 68 staff in Gaza right now. On average, we try to stay in touch with them every day. On average, we usually reach about 2/3 of them at any given time. Fortunately, we have not experienced any deaths of our staff. There have been injuries. Every single one of them has been displaced, almost all of them multiple times. And so this is something that is both very personal and professional in terms of them, their families, their work, and their communities. And it is something that is weighing heavily on us as fellow staff who want to be in solidarity. We, in terms of our advocacy on this, we as an organization have also called for a ceasefire. We have been tending to lean on the humanitarian aspects of our work in this, given the humanitarian needs that are just sadly skyrocketing in Gaza, as well as, I think, and this is something that will increasingly, I hope, become more on people's radars, is the commensurate spike in violence in the West Bank, and a lot of the real concerns that we see that have just not been getting as much attention as what we've seen in Gaza. So we have been calling for a ceasefire. We have been calling very forcefully for additional humanitarian access to be allowed into Gaza for life-saving humanitarian assistance. And as you say, it has been very difficult, especially as an organization that is based in the U.S. but works internationally as well as advocates internationally. And so I'm sure, as you're all aware, just the U.S. context is very different, and the U.S. relationship is different. And so that's been something that we have had to grapple with as an organization. How do we stay true to our commitments while also trying to meet people where they're at and find even incremental paths forward. And so I would say, at least, I'm not going to tell you how to advocate, because I think we each bring our own strengths to the table in this respect. But I would say that there has been a slow chipping away. You have seen incremental, I do not say by any stretch of the imagination sufficient, rhetoric coming out of the administration that we did not see in the immediate aftermath, and there has been some small openings and cracks. It's not enough. It's not coming quickly enough, but it is enough that I, and our organization are committed to continuing to find those avenues, find those areas in which there can be agreement, there can be a compelling argument made for to save lives and alleviate human suffering.
Thank you. And Shiri, I don't know if you would like to respond to that question as well.
Yes, very much so. I would say that the parent circle would say that when you take sides, when you are either pro-Palestine or pro-Israel, you're not helping Bassam Aramin or Robbie Damlin or anyone else living in Israel and Palestine. You're just importing a conflict into the United States. And we have seen that. That conflict has exploded all over the United States, whether it's from campuses and local communities. It's not about the messaging. It's about the tactics. Sit down and talk to somebody who doesn't agree with you. Sit down and understand what someone from the other side wants to see. How does it help Bassam and Robbie for you to leave out the message of bring the hostages home and only talk about one side? It does not help. I'm not saying one side is right and one side is wrong. I'm saying it does not help. So don't be pro-Israel, don't be pro-Palestine, be pro-peace, be pro-solution.
Thank you. And just to round us out, Mike, I know Search also works in the region.
So Jerusalem is our oldest office outside the U.S., and it's in a place where we've been working through all of the ups and downs for a solution there. I think just the only other reflection that I might get, and our CEO was on CNN the other day, and the question came up, and it comes up with frustrating frequency. It's like, hey, you guys have been working, you search for common ground. Have you found it yet? You guys have been in Israel and Palestine since the early 90s, and yet there's still war. And I think having that conversation comes back to and how many billions are going to war there, and how much is the investment exactly for the kinds of situation from different people pouring money in to put us in the kind of situation that we're in. And so I think as we go ahead, I think one of the questions I asked, how much would you pay not to be here for the massacre on on October 7th not to have happened, for the bombings not to be happening right now, for us not to be having any of this conversation, how much would that be worth to the American taxpayer, to the American Congress, the American State Department, to the president? And go dial it back, and what do you wish you were doing then? What do you wish you were doing, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 months ago? And everything that you wish you were doing now, you wish you had been doing then, if you did. How many places should you be doing that now? How many places should you be investing in peace? So that you should not, 6 months from now, a year from now, we're not talking about the next place. And I think that lesson, there should be a little bit more accountability for all of our political leaders for the decisions they did and didn't take. In the region, first and foremost, in America as well, where we vote and pay our taxes. But I would keep that also front of mind. What should we have been doing? And even if whatever we do, and hopefully we do an awful lot more for Israel and particularly for Palestine and for the suffering, we have the opportunity to do that for an awful lot of new places.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I want to just offer huge gratitude, not just for our 4 panelists here today, but for all the peacebuilders that they represent, that their organizations work with, for the peacebuilders around the world who, to Mike's point, are doing what we wish we might have been doing 6 months ago, 6 years ago, 6 decades ago. Who, like Gulalai and her sister, are making the choice to act now to try and make a change in their communities for the better. If we could have 10 million Gulalai and Sabas, the world might be a really different place. And just huge gratitude to all of you, huge gratitude to the organizations behind you and the peacebuilders working behind you. And thank you all. I know we are at 8:45 p.m., which for the folks on Zoom, you might be across the United States in a different time zone thinking, oh, it's just time for dinner. I know for many of us, it is teeteringly, precariously close to our bedtimes. So thank you all. We will be back here. We have breakfast tomorrow, and we have a panel tomorrow morning with Congresswoman Representative Moore of Utah, his chief of staff who helped pass Elie Wiesel when she worked at Ann Wagley's office. We have one of you all is going to join us on the stage. We have a constituent advocate with the advocacy teams who's going to join us. It's going to be great. It's going to be energetic. And just thank you all so much for all of your work.
Recording stopped.
No?
Friends, we have some closing announcements. Just 1 moment, please. Very brief.
Thank you. Lauren's got amazing projection, and I really respect that.
High school principal.
You know, it's a transferable skill, folks. Good to practice. All right, so we do have a couple of announcements before we adjourn here. What a night. This has been really rich. We've heard a lot of deep messages. Can we give another round of applause for our panelists, for our audience asking such deep and important questions, and for all of you being in this room here now? I'm going to turn it over to one of our process observers to give us a reflection on the night and a few reminders. And then from there, we'll quickly give a few announcements about tomorrow. Lauren, you have the mic.
Hello, friends. I'm Lauren Brownlee. I'm Associate General Secretary for Community and Culture. And tonight I am subbing in for AT and Tracy, who are our community designated listeners. I, along with my colleague Linnea, are staff designated listeners. And so we are sharing some of the announcements that AT and Tracy will be making in future nights. I just want to note our masking and testing requests that we have asked that everyone test upon arrival or right before coming. So if you haven't tested, done a COVID test, yes, we have COVID tests out by the registration table that are available for everyone. And then our masking expectations come from the requests that we've heard from community about what would help people to feel safe in this beloved community. And so we are asking that, given the proximity of people and the time that we're spending in the ballroom, when we're in the ballroom, if people are not actively speaking, so either up here speaking or speaking, asking a question, that people put a mask on, have a mask on. And we're asking that in breakout rooms, that if there's a member of that breakout room who would like for people in that room to be masked, that people feel comfortable sharing that, and that we will have masks in the rooms as well to be able to accommodate that. It's a policy that at FCNL on staff we call mask friendly, in our Quaker friendly sense of really caring for each other and making sure that everyone's needs are met. And so just in the role of process observer and calling us to our community agreements, I just want to name that these requests connect with our community agreements of being supportive, respect, trustworthy, caring, agape love, empathy. So thank you for your attention to this form of our community care, and both masks and tests are available by the registration desk and will remain so throughout our time together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lauren. And as we carry the inspiring messages we heard tonight, let's look forward to gathering tomorrow. Breakfast will begin at 7:30 in the ballroom foyer. Pre-lunch tomorrow is going to be all about preparing for our lobby visits. So please come ready to learn how to take action. After lunch, we will be diving into lobbying for peace building, so bringing our voices to the cause and to our legislators' offices. There will also be opportunities for questions and community building during that afternoon time, and there will also be an opportunity to call for a ceasefire in Israel-Palestine from 4:30 to 5:30 p.m. So with that, to our esteemed panelists, to our fantastic audience, I hope we can all close us out with a round of applause as a good night. Thank you. You are released.